In this training tutorial for GTFS Builder, we're going to focus on schedules. We're pulling together the data and details that we have in the single file GTFS Generator workbook, and we're now looking and heading toward that Schedules V3 tab. We have our timetable. We've seen how it looks on Google Maps. That's 7:32 in the morning, arriving at 8:27. We'd like to plant a few seeds about how the data is organized in Schedules V3. We have our routes. They have their colors and URL, and within a route you have different trip groups, also known as patterns. A morning and afternoon may be the same stop order and consecutive stops. In the middle of the day, you might go to the senior center for lunch, or stop at the high school only in the mornings and afternoons, but not in the middle of the day. Another trip group is by Saturday, and so day of the week and variations in the trips create trip groups. We'll see how that works in practice. There are always consecutive stops in a trip group, no blanks. Together we'll draw the shape line, which is the pattern of this on a map that will match each trip group. The visual on the map is a shape ID that will be assigned. A quick snapshot of where we're heading, and this looks to show the weekday and Saturday as different trip groups. We're looking here at a blank, which means we're going to change the pattern and delete that row and create a unique trip group named No Clearwater. Common trip group errors include when we duplicate the trip group name, we cause a 457, which is a fancy name for a duplicate. We need the unique name for each trip group, found in column A. Were you to put a blank row innocently into the timetable, that stops the trip. When we don't know the time, or it's a non-time point in our timetable, we use an asterisk or a star to hold the trip together rather than using a blank. A trip is at least 2 stops, so you cannot have a column of data with just one time in the timetable. Or end a trip with a star without a time. We're really bringing things together. We're in the Schedules V3 tab, and we go to the trip group and we name it. In this first row for a trip group, we will be assigning whether it's a wheelchair accessible trip with a 1 or a 2 saying this particular route and trip group do not allow for wheelchairs. A blank is the same as saying we don't know. For bicycles, the same rules apply. A number 2 would say we do not allow with a bike rack to carry bicycles. So in this particular case, we have bike accessibility and wheelchair. Shape ID and block ID are also assigned in that top row of the trip group. We next start to enter the route ID, which we receive from our Routes tab. We next assign the service ID. Service ID is generated from our Calendar tab. In this case, we're choosing the weekday service for this first trip group, and we're putting that in the Service ID column. Direction ID is generally a 0 or a 1. For inbound, outbound, for loop routes, assign a 0. Our trip head sign will be replaced by the stop head sign you'll see in just a few moments. And because we organized our stop information in stop order, we could copy and paste from in the Stops tab and enter that into our columns for stop ID and stop name. Once you've copied over a section of data, be certain to remove stops not appropriate for the trip group. In this case, remove the SB or southbound stops, as this example is a northbound trip group direction. Make sure with stop ID and stop name in their proper columns. We'll next use the stop name as the next stop, somewhat like an enunciator, for stop head sign. We entered equals G and the next row down, G4, and then we filled down. For that flag stop, if the rider needs to call, it's a number 2 and a number 1 is no pickup. Leaving it blank is most common. If we have a wait time at a stop, maybe 5 minutes, we enter it as midnight plus 5 minutes, 12:05 a.m. We're now ready to start looking at our time points, and when we have a time on the timetable, we would would put a number 1. A 0 is used when we don't have a time on the timetable, entered as a star or asterisk. Now we'll start entering our timetable in from the schedule, and we may already have this in Excel, and we could copy paste that into our workbook. We now get to have some fun with Excel where there's a function called time. We would add time, as in 4 hours and 5 minutes, to the prior cell and start to build our timetable based on how much time there is and fill down for those times. When we have no time in there as a non-time point, we enter a star to hold that trip together. Now that we know how many stops and they're in stop order, we can fill in our route, service ID, and direction ID with the same information related to that trip group. We're going to leave a blank row between trip groups and now build the trip in the other direction, heading back to the Ho Tribal Center with many of the same stops because we can safely cross and meet the rider in that same location. We want to be mindful that we use northbound and southbound appropriately. This trip group travels south. Fill down in the head signs. We're filling in the row for wheelchair and bicycle along the trip group name, and we fill in the rest of the timetable, where in some cases we might even carry forward the same formula, and it uses the same interval of time with hours, minutes, seconds, using that formula. Now let's build our next trip group or Saturday service. There are 2 trips on that day, and so we have a lot of the information from above. We're changing to Saturday, and we're entering the times as outbound 0 direction and inbound 1 direction for those 2 Saturday trips. What happens when we have a variation in a trip group? Perhaps there was a blank on our timetable. We might decide to duplicate data for one trip group to build the next one, because we'll just be deleting one row, and move it down to its own trip group. And we notice a duplicate in column A for the trip group name. Modify the name to make it unique. We added no Clearwater. We'll focus on column S, trip group 2, that's going to be moved out of the first trip group and remain only in the second trip group. We've used references, so we can't just delete the data in column S. When S2 is removed, we see only the formula for adding time in column T. Let's copy and paste values, or 1, 2, 3. Trip 3, and now there won't be a formula there, and we can delete what's in trip 2, column S, by editing and clearing that data. In the no Clearwater second trip group, we'll make sure that TO2 at 11:37 is not referenced, so we can remove trips 1, 3, and 4. Our final step is to delete the row that was the blank. That was the purpose of creating a trip group with no blanks. This next example is the holiday schedule, where perhaps we don't take the last trip of the day or the first trip of the day. We assign the service ID of HOL and fill that down. Update the trip group names so they also reflect the weekday, holiday, inbound and outbound, deleting the trip that we will not take, and modify any other times that are needed to represent holiday service. To turn on and off holiday service, we would go to the calendar dates tab, and holiday service ID would be a 1 for add, and the Monday through Friday service would be a number 2 for delete. The data in Schedules V3 that we've been working on will now generate stop times and trips from the Notes tab. We're going to go through a variety of errors to show you how easy it will be to correct them. Scroll down on the Notes tab to generate stop times and trips. Click on it and see if anything pops up. These pop-up messages will always refer to errors in Schedules V3 tab. In this case, the error is in cell H3. When we deleted a row, we forgot to fill down that name and stop head sign. Easy to fix, we made that correction. Let's try again. The process is complete. There are no internal data errors. Let's revisit the Trips tab to see if any other data is missing. Now we notice that a trip head sign is missing. The trip head sign needs to be on the first row of data for each trip, and we visit the schedules and look to trip 4, where the start time in column U is later than the original other trips. So we need to add trip head sign in row 13. Remember that 5-minute wait time that we have as an example? We'd like you to see how that 7:56 becomes 8:01 in the stop time tab. It's for arrive and depart time due to that wait time. Try not to get confused when you're reviewing the stop times, because you'll be seeing a time in a row with the next stop due to the stop head sign associated in that row. You've now generated stop times and trips, an important piece of your GTFS. If any additional questions come up, please reach out to us at support@nationalrtap.org.